Hello folks, long time no see. This video here is going to be pretty short. Um, Probably not any animation or any of that, just real quick to let you know because everybody knows what team I like here. And so I'm going to be asked by a lot of people what I think about what's going on right now with the Bengals. This is Friday, January 6th. It's also Epiphany. Happy Epiphany. This is so we're 2 days before the Bengals-Ravens game, and we're 4 days or so after the Bengals-Bills game that was canceled, and that's where we sit. So they've just released what they're going to do about the playoffs and the AFC playoffs and all of that. And so what do I think? Here's my answer to that. Uh, I agree with Zach Taylor, Joe Mixon, and others who've complained about it. I think they should, and I think the Bengal front office also did. They said, hey, this isn't really fair. But as far as I can see so far, they're not throwing a fit. They're just pointing it out and sort of a small protest. And I think that's just right because it names it, and then you kind of go forward. And I think that's what they're going to do. I think they're going to go. They're going to beat the Ravens. I will predict by 2 scores or more. I would maybe 4 scores. It could be a total blowout. But even if they don't, even if somehow a third-string quarterback for Baltimore somehow beats that amazing Bengal defense. Anyway, if that should somehow happen, still, what I'm about to say pertains, and it's this: the NFL definitely already has rules for what happens when a game gets canceled. They were already written down; they're in print. They are the rules, and yet they did not go with those rules. Why is that? We can say it's an unprecedented situation, and that's true. That's true, but the fact that it's unprecedented in terms of the actual health issue that occurred does not itself mean you need to write new rules ad hoc. But that's what the NFL did. So the question is why? Why did they do that? And this is my answer, okay? They did that because we live in a day and age when rules really are not that important. In fact, rules are kind of, they're bad in a certain sense. They're kind of the man, they're the establishment, they're, whatever. We also, in the postmodern era in which we live, there are good things about it, there are bad things about it. We live in a very storied age, which is great because that is, as a biblicist, I love that because God has given us His Word as a story, and we're in that story. That's the kind of theology that I teach and preach and think about and pray about and live in. I dwell there. And I think it's fantastic that people are thinking more storied ways nowadays. That's fantastic, but it has a dark side. Of course it does, right? And one of the things is there is that sense of entitlement that people have and a lot of other things that come in because we know how stories go. Like we've seen, read, nowadays most people have seen enough stories at this point that they don't really, they know the pattern, they know how it's supposed to go. So everybody feels like this is not something where we ought to just look at the rules and say, okay, here's what the rules say, and let's go with it. Instead, they feel like we need to be living in an episode of Friday Night Lights or some sports drama movie. And so the NFL feels it with Twitter watching and everybody else looking over their shoulder. The NFL feels like they need to write a sports drama narrative. And that means that, this tragic thing happened to the Bills, and it is. And by the way, I've been praying for Damar Hamlin, been praying that Christ would be magnified and glorified all around it, particularly through his healing. So I'm still praying that. Anyway, this terrible, tragic thing happened to him and to the Buffalo team and everything else. We've seen some great things. Everybody agrees that it was the right thing to do to not finish playing the game that night. Everybody understood it that night, and in the days since, everybody's very clear on that. But again, there's already a rule for what happens, what to do when that happens. Anyway, the issue that I see here is that the NFL wants to write a story rather than letting the sport be the sport. So that means that they need to craft it. They need to guide the playoffs so that they come off like a Sunday, Sunday evening special back in the old days or whatever. And the way that works best and easiest for them is to create a thing where it kind of dumps on the Bengals. Big surprise. Okay, well, here's what I have to say about that. Okay, that's fine. So, Zach, Joe, Tyler, T especially, Samaje, and all you guys, all you awesome dudes on the defense. I can name them all, I suppose, but I love all of them. I think they're fantastic. Trey, how about Trey? He's so great. Anyway, here's what I'd say. Guys, go out there and whoop up on the Ravens, and then keep going through the playoffs, taking out team after team after team. And then when you stand there at the end holding the Lombardi, everyone will have to admit that you earned it more than once. You earned it like once and a half. You really deserve it. And there won't be any of these kind of questions lingering over it. Now, for Buffalo, they don't deserve to have this happen either. But because of what's being done here, the spirit of narrative drama that's being put over the sport, if Buffalo does win it, there will be, as someone I was just talking to a moment ago pointed out, no one will say it, but lingering in the back, there'll be this question of legitimacy. Did they get it because they were helped out by the narrative writers at the NFL? Right? Is it the narrative football league, or is it a sport? So that's the question I run with there. I'm all for the idea of living in a storied world and living our lives as stories. I've been telling students this for years. I tell my family this. This is what I do myself. I look at decisions and say, I look at it as I'm in a story. What should I do here? Should I do this thing or should I do that thing? Big life decisions. I don't just weigh pros and cons of some sort of Vulcan or a machine. I look at the story. I actually, way back years ago, in the modern era, I haven't done so well, but way back when we were having our kids and all our friends and family were having kids and we were in that time of life, I predicted the sex of 14 births in a row. I think it was 14, and on the 15th one I finally missed, I believe, and then I retired from that. Then I came out of retirement here a few years ago, and it's been lousy. But anyway, and people say, how do you do it? What do you do? And I just say, I look at people, I look at their story, I look at it all as a narrative. I say, what do I think like God would give them, in that story? And I was right for 14 times in a row. And somebody calculated the odds on that, by the way, and it was amazing. Anyhow, my point is, I'm all for living in story, and I'm all for crafting things and even approaching ethical things that way. I don't have a big problem with that if what we're doing is we're looking at Scripture, seeing the narrative of Christ. I don't know if you can hear that. I think that's my granddaughter. I don't think she's hurt. But anyway, she probably just heard about what they did to the Bengals. Anyway, if we're living in the story of the Scriptures, the story of Christ, right, and God's story with Israel, which is all one thing, right, and we're not making it our story and trying to write our own grand, fulfilling narrative. Instead, we're putting ourselves in or seeing ourselves as already in the story that God is writing, and then working with Him, right, in tandem with God. He's the author of our stories, but He's doing it in such a way so that He's having us make decisions to be cognizant of that fact and to work that way. Yep, that's great. This is something different. This is the kind of thing that we'll say, now I might offend some people here, but it's true. There's a certain band in the overall. I don't know. I'm not a techie. I don't know how that works, but like just let's say there's lots of different bands of what's going on in the conversation in the West these days about race. There's a certain band of that has this attitude that it's okay to dump on white people and hate white people because it's their turn, which is bizarre, right? But what is that coming from? It's coming from this dark side of a narrative idea, right? Maybe if you were writing the story of a civilization and everything, as a writer, you might kind of, yeah, we're going to throw the shoe on the other foot and do this kind of thing, but that in a sense is sort of a playing God, right? Because you're going to direct the outcome of society by doing something that's really kind of bad that way. That's kind of how I see this move of the NFL. They're trying to write the playoffs. W-R-I-T-E, write the playoffs. And I just want to see the Bengals rise above it and despite that, win. That would be fantastic. I would love to see that. That's the narrative I'm hoping to see play out. Okay. All right. Well, that's it. See y'all later. Remember, everything's about Jesus. It really is. I'll see ya. Bye. Happy Epiphany.